Hi, I'm Evelyn Tribole, and welcome to day 8 of the Intuitive Eating series. And today I'm unpacking a really important principle. And I realize I probably say that about every principle, but this one, it's respect your body. I'll never forget over 25 years ago when Elise and I came up with this particular principle, we spent a lot of time thinking about word choice, because what ends up happening with most of the people that we're working with, they're not there. They're very uncomfortable in their bodies. They have body dissatisfaction. And sometimes when we talk about this idea of acceptance or even love, it just doesn't relate. So we started getting into this idea of respect and showing acts of respect to your body. And one of the things, before I unpack this in terms of some things you can start working on if you choose, is I think it's really important to acknowledge and understand how fat phobic our culture is, and that this fat phobia is rooted in racism. And I'll tell you, there's a book by the academic Sabrina Strings that really unpacked this in such detail. I'd highly recommend reading it. In fact, I'll put a link to it in my stories. And it's called Fearing the Black Body: The Racial Roots of Fat Phobia. And this dates back to the 17th century, way before healthcare even got involved in terms of commenting on bodies and making bodies a project to change. And the problem that's what's happening is this is creating weight stigma, this is creating body dissatisfaction, and it's causing harm. There's been a lot of research on this, that weight stigma in of itself is really an independent risk factor for so many of the health conditions that are associated with health. And that word association is a really important one. So many times important confounders in these research is missing, such as social determinants of health, such as trauma, all types of things. And so when I talk about this with my patients, they're often really surprised. They haven't heard some of this stuff. And I think it's really important that our body size, for the most part, is really determined by genetics and other things that are beyond our conscious control. And so what ends up happening when you create an internal war about your body, it's problematic. It's not healthy for your mind. And yet I also understand when people are in marginalized bodies and larger bodies, they don't feel safe in our culture that is so hostile. So there's no judgment on whatever it is that you've been doing to try to stay safe. But this is something we need to look at, and having unconditional positive regard, not just for yourself, for everybody, and having access to health care. So that's another important part of this principle. Is intuitive eating is aligned with health at every size, which is a social justice framework about having access to health care, that we can, if we choose, focus on health without focusing on weight. Weight is not a behavior. Size is not a behavior. And so what I'd like you to start looking at are acts of respect. What are ways that you can be respectful to your body, or maybe even just kind to your body? Taking it for a rest, taking it for a walk if you feel inclined. What are some things that you might be able to do that are realistic in the conditions in which we're living in right now, which is so unprecedented? Another helpful way to start accessing this principle is to start paying attention to things you might appreciate about your body. And think about this: being in a body, it's your home for the rest of your life. Having a body can do some really amazing things in terms of just our heart functioning, having a skin that allows us to touch and feel and have connection with other people. And so sometimes this is a way to start accessing this aspect. And one of the things I want to really emphasize, I think out of all the principles, and I think I say this too, I have a lot of patients that struggle with this, because we're talking about a belief system that's been so rooted for such a long time. So it's important to give yourself some kindness and some compassion on this. It's important to remember you're so much more than a body. So thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to read your comments.